While Washington was performing dominance, Moscow and Tehran were building something far more dangerous. Not a flashy alliance, not a dramatic summit with flags and handshakes, a pipeline, quiet, functional, and designed to keep two heavily sanctioned powers operational under Western pressure. And while that pipeline was being constructed, the man who claimed only he could fix it was busy attacking the very walls holding the structure together. Two theaters, one pressure machine. And Trump is holding both ends of the cable. Imagine you are playing chess against someone who announces every move before making it. They slam pieces down hard. They talk loudly about domination. They insult the other players at the table. And while everyone watches the performance, their opponent quietly builds a structure on the other side of the board. Not dramatic, not loud, just connected. Every piece linking to the next. By the time the loud player looks up, the board has already been rewired. Hold that thought, because that is the strategic picture assembling itself across two continents while Washington produced content. Drop your answer in the comments. Did Putin outmaneuver Trump, or did Trump hand him the tools to do it? Let us rewind the clock. When Russia launched its full-scale invasion of Ukraine, it entered sustained Western pressure unlike anything it had faced in the post-Cold War era. Sanctions, export controls, asset freezes, diplomatic isolation. The theory was straightforward. Squeeze hard enough and Moscow recalculates. What the theory underestimated was what happens when a sanctioned power finds a sanctioned partner with complementary needs and shared enemies. Enter Iran. Iran had spent decades navigating Western sanctions. It had developed workarounds, alternative financial channels, and deep institutional knowledge of how to keep a state functioning when the formal global economy tries to shut the door. Russia needed exactly that. And Iran needed what Russia had in abundance: military production capacity, technical expertise, and a permanent Security Council seat. The exchange that followed was documented gradually. Western governments confirmed Iran supplying Russia with drones. Open source reporting showed Russia moving toward local production tied to Iranian designs. Two states that had previously maintained diplomatic convenience began developing something with actual battlefield utility. Once a relationship shifts from polite alignment to wartime usefulness, it becomes leverage. And leverage, once built, does not get surrendered because Washington wants a cleaner news cycle. Receipt number one, the Russia-Iran war pipeline. What Moscow and Tehran constructed was not a formal military alliance, something more durable, a habit of cooperation under pressure, drones flowing west, production knowledge flowing both directions, financial workarounds being tested and refined. Political cover extended in international forums. Here is why that matters. Once two states shift to wartime utility, the relationship develops its own internal logic. Each exchange creates dependency. Each dependency creates incentive to protect the relationship. Iranian drone designs appearing on Ukrainian battlefields were not improvisation. They were the visible output of a relationship quietly deepening for years. And here is the part most analysis misses. Moscow was not building trust with Tehran, it was building optionality. The fantasy that Putin can be separated from Iran through personal chemistry and flattering phone calls ignores how the Kremlin actually operates. It banks pressure points. It does not surrender them for free, regardless of how warmly the other side smiles at the camera. Receipt number two, how Trump dismantled the walls while claiming to strengthen them. Trump did not simply criticize NATO allies for defense spending. He made the core guarantee of the alliance sound conditional and transactional in ways no American president had done publicly before. He suggested America was being played by its partners. He said out loud that he would encourage Russia to do whatever it wanted to members he considered delinquent on spending. That was not just campaign rhetoric, it was a signal received in every foreign ministry in Europe and most importantly in Moscow. Every time Trump treated the alliance as a grievance rather than an asset, he was telling the Kremlin something enormously useful. The load-bearing wall has a price. Find it and apply pressure there. Congressional delays on Ukraine aid sent a parallel signal. Support for Ukraine was a contested position inside the American political system. And contested positions can be eroded slowly through wedge issues, through the gradual normalization of asking whether the price is worth it. While Trump was building a politics of grievance toward allies, European capitals were building backups. More defense spending, more strategic autonomy conversations, more contingency planning for a world where the American umbrella remains large but is no longer unconditional. They were not being disloyal, they were being rational. And while the backups were being sketched, Putin was taking notes. Receipt number 3, the Middle East shock channel and the wallet you did not know was in the room. Once the Strait of Hormuz, the Red Sea, tanker insurance, missile ranges, and force protection start dominating the strategic map, your grocery bill is already in the room. So is your gas bill. Airline costs, shipping costs, trucking costs, farm input costs. If energy prices jump, fertilizer gets more expensive. If shipping insurance climbs, goods cost more. If inflation expectations move, interest rate relief gets harder. The Kremlin understands this transmission mechanism with precision. Moscow does not need to win a military engagement in the Middle East. It needs the Middle East to remain expensive and attention-consuming for Washington. Every oil price spike is a political liability for whoever is in the White House. Every shipping disruption is a reminder that the global economy is more fragile than the rhetoric of dominance admits. That is the cross-wiring strategy. Ukraine talks to energy. Energy talks to inflation. Inflation talks to elections. Iran talks to shipping. Shipping talks to alliance cohesion. It does not require a single dramatic Kremlin ultimatum. It just requires that the board stay messy. If this video is connecting dots you have not seen assembled elsewhere, hit subscribe right now. This is moving faster than any single outlet can track, and you need to be here when the next piece drops. The contrast between the two operating systems is now impossible to ignore. The Kremlin's approach is cold, patient, and structurally oriented. Putin does not need a clean victory everywhere. He needs a messy board where every Western choice carries a second cost. He leaned on energy after the invasion, deepened the Iran relationship, waited for American political dysfunction, kept stacking leverage points until one theater could reliably pressure another. Trump's operating system runs on entirely different logic. Image, pressure, loyalty tests, grievance. He attacks NATO while claiming to save it. He treats Ukraine support as a culture war prop rather than a structural component of Western security architecture. You cannot run a superpower like a reality show cliffhanger and expect allies, markets, and adversaries to absorb the volatility for free. You cannot flatter the man who built the trap and then claim surprise when you find yourself standing inside it. So what does this mean for you? If you drive to work, run a small business, buy groceries, heat your home, or manage payroll, you are already inside the blast radius of these decisions. Higher oil means higher transport costs. Higher transport costs feed into food, retail, and construction. Shipping disruptions ripple into inventories. Insurance costs rise quietly and show up everywhere. And once companies reroute supply chains around a new geopolitical reality, they do not simply reverse because politicians change their tone. The contracts move, the investment moves, the jobs follow, and they do not automatically come back. 3 scenarios from here. Scenario 1 is the managed reset. Market pressure and allied diplomacy force a cool down. Ukraine support continues in some form. Everyone claims a symbolic win, but the structural changes remain. The Russia-Iran pipeline does not dissolve because a ceasefire holds. Europe does not abandon contingency planning because one summit produces warm language. The temperature drops. The architecture built during the crisis stays built. Scenario 2 is the domino realignment. More middle powers conclude that depending too heavily on one unpredictable center carries unacceptable risk. Europe accelerates defense coordination, regional powers diversify security ties, alternatives built during crisis become permanent roads. The United States remains powerful, but no longer the unquestioned axis around which every calculation automatically turns. Scenario 3 is the one nobody wants to name out loud. More attacks, more retaliation, more shipping pressure feeding inflation that is already politically toxic. A Kremlin probing every weakness with the patience of an institution that measures time in decades. An Iran file that never cools because structural grievances were bombed around rather than addressed. In that world, escalation does not need to become a generational conflict to do lasting damage. It just needs to remain expensive and ambiguous long enough to normalize permanent instability as the new baseline. Russia and Iran built a pipeline while Washington built a reality show. And the audience watching both productions is now drawing its own conclusions about which one will still be running. Did Putin outmaneuver Trump, or did Trump hand him every tool he needed? Is Europe hedging because it became disloyal, or because trusting an unconditional guarantee that was made conditional would be reckless? And if every crisis is now cross-wired to every other crisis, is a clean reset even possible? Or are we already living inside the restructure, watching it happen one bypass at a time? Drop your answer in the comments. I read every single one. Subscribe, because the next chapters, NATO burden sharing, Ukraine aid politics, Gulf escalation risk, and the inflation consequences, are coming fast. This story is not slowing down. Do not look away. This content is commentary and analysis for informational purposes only. It does not constitute financial, legal, military, or geopolitical advice. Consult qualified experts before making decisions based on the information presented.